So as we get closer and closer to the Ghorman Massacre in Andor, we've learned that the Legends version of the Ghorman Massacre is actually still canon, and now under the name the Tarkin Massacre. So I figured today we could take a closer look at that event, or at least the way it's described in Legends, and how it's likely going to be described in canon, and we'll talk about its effect on the current events going on Ghorman. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Now, it should go without saying that this video will contain spoilers for at least the first 6 episodes of Andor Season 2, so if you haven't seen that yet and are trying to avoid spoilers, I recommend clicking off the video now. So in the last few episodes, it has been very directly referenced that there was a massacre on Ghorman carried out against Ghorman protesters by Grand Moff Tarkin, an event now known as the Tarkin Massacre. So I figured let's dive in and talk about exactly what that is. So we're going to go and discuss its Legends history, and we'll talk a little bit about how it's likely going to be portrayed in canon. So in Legends, in the early days of the reign of the Empire, the planet Ghorman was the subject of a large-scale taxation campaign, which greatly disrupted the lives of the citizens of that planet, and as a result, widespread protests broke out all across Ghorman. Now, Grand Moff Tarkin was dispatched to negotiate with the protesters and reach an end to this impasse. However, when he arrived on the planet Ghorman in 18 BBY, he discovered that his landing pad, set aside for his vessel's arrival, was filled with protesters who had crowded the space intended for his ship. Now, claiming to have the authority of the Emperor and the approval of the Emperor, Tarkin ordered his ship just landed on top of the protesters, an event that killed hundreds and injured countless more, what would become known as the Ghorman Massacre in Legends, and now the Tarkin Massacre in canon. In Legends, this massacre led to the Delegation of 2000, a group of senators who disapproved of Palpatine's actions, formally breaking off to start the beginnings of the Rebel Alliance. But in canon, that's clearly not what happened, and now it appears that the Delegation of 2000 is a thing of the past, with many of its members scattered to the wind across a barely functional Imperial Senate. On Ghorman in Legends, this led to a wide-scale uprising and a vicious Imperial crackdown, but it appears like in canon that played out a little bit differently, with a great sense of sorrow and a redefining of the relationship between Ghorman and the Empire, likely being the case in canon. Now, it appears like a few minor things might have been changed about this event in canon versus its Legends depiction. First things first, its name has been changed from the Ghorman Massacre to the Tarkin Massacre, as the Ghorman Massacre is going to be a different event in Star Wars history that we should see in the next couple episodes. But the other one is that the event is moved from a landing pad to the main square, and Tarkin's ship is referred to as a cruiser, which would imply that it's significantly larger than the vessel he was captaining in Legends. At the site of this massacre, the Ghormans have erected a massive memorial in honor of those killed, and it leaves a big black mark on the history of the Empire in Ghorman history. Now, in canon, on Ghorman, it didn't lead to a massive uprising like it did in Legends, but instead simply led to some bad blood and a redefining of the relationship between the Empire and the Ghorman people. And the Ghormans would go on to erect memorials all over their city, with one large memorial at the site of the massacre, and it became sort of a sacred event in the history of the Ghorman people. This, however, is starting to cause problems now, 15 years later, as the Empire moves in and prepares large-scale mining operations on Ghorman to support the construction of the Death Star. And in support of these operations, a large Imperial military presence is being moved to the planet, necessitating the construction of a very large, what appears to be an armory, in Ghorman's capital city that towers over the city and casts a shadow over the memorial built in honor of the victims of the Tarkin Massacre. So it's clear that there's still an underlying resentment towards the Empire for the events of the Tarkin Massacre, which is completely understandable, and it's very obvious that the Tarkin Massacre was a key event in Ghorman's history that definitely has set the stage for the Ghorman Massacre to come, and the events that would ultimately lead to the creation of the Rebel Alliance. Now, it's entirely possible that in the next couple episodes we'll learn more about this event, and maybe I'll make a follow-up video on this if that's the case, but for now, this is what we know about the Tarkin Massacre, bringing some information in from Legends and what we know of it from canon. If you'd like to learn about why the Ghorman Massacre that we're going to see coming up in canon is so significant, I'll leave a link up here to a video I put out earlier this week on why the Ghorman Massacre matters and why it's so important in Star Wars history. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think it makes sense for the Ghorman people to, not launch an all-out revolution following the events of the Tarkin Massacre. After all, it seems like they kind of took it as an insult but didn't take any real action other than redefining their relationship with the Empire. Do you think that's too light for the massive number of casualties caused by Tarkin's actions, or do you think it makes sense for a people still grappling with the incredibly new power of the Galactic Empire? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.